BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, I'm Alasdair Lamont and this is the Scottish Football Podcast. It's Thursday the 26th of September and today the focus is mainly on southern Sweden.
They might be in again, Malmo! It's two! It's in off the post! Calamitous from Rangers!
Can Rangers get revenge for that costly defeat 3 years ago as they open their Europa League campaign against Malmo? We'll get the lowdown on what sort of opposition there'll be from former Ibrox hero Joachim Bjorklund.
If Rangers want to hurt them, there's plenty of opportunities to press them high, try to win the ball high, and win the ball close to the goal, let them go straight for it.
And we'll have the latest from inside the Rangers camp.
And it's about going full in this game against a good opponent who play good offensive football. Everybody's excited to play this game.
The Scottish Football Podcast.
I'm joined this morning by former Rangers striker Rory and as I say, we're also going to be hearing later on from the former Rangers and Sweden defender Joachim Bjorklund. But before all that, let's take a very quick look at the latest Scottish football headlines. Rangers face a fight with history as they bid to overturn a poor record against Malmo in their Europa League opener, says manager Philippe Clement. The Ibrox side are in Sweden for the first match of the revamped Europa League, having lost twice to Malmo in Champions League qualifiers in the past 13 years. Hibs expect to get their full allocation of tickets for Sunday's clash with Rangers after an intervention from the SPFL. There had been doubt they'd receive any tickets at all because of extensive works carried out at Ibrox. The Rangers could face repercussions from the SPFL if the tickets aren't received on time. Stephen Naismith could still be Hearts head coach had they not had a very average second half in Saturday's defeat at St Mirren. That's according to Chief Executive Andrew McKinlay, who says that's when he knew he had to make a change. And Celtic will have too much for Vorskla Poltava in the second leg of their second round Champions League qualifier in the view of former Scotland captain Gemma Fay. They're attempting to become the first Scottish team to qualify for the group stage. Okay, let's turn our attention to the Eleda Stadion in Sweden, where Rangers will face Malmo this evening in the opening game of the Europa League campaign. Rory, you and I both at Ibrox for the pretty comfortable win, it has to be said, over Dundee at the weekend. But now it's back to European concerns. How big a game do you feel this is for Rangers as they start this campaign?
I think it's a big one, Al, because I think if you look at some of the fixtures they've got in this section, or I say section, it's the revamped style, but the games they've got ahead, even though it's away from home, this looks like, you know, one of the more winnable ones of the away fixtures. So, you know, they've got a bit of history, bit of needle with Malmo over the last 13 years, as you say. So I think it's a big one in terms of psychologically going into the European campaign if they want to start well and put down the building blocks for a successful European campaign.
Obviously, they had the huge disappointment of the defeat at Celtic Park a few weeks back now. Since the international break, they've come back and won both, keeping clean sheets in both against both Dundee sides. What do you make of the kind of recovery they've begun to make since that defeat at Celtic?
I think it was a battling performance at Tannadice in the second half, and I think they played well against Dundee. I enjoyed watching Rangers, and I've not always been able to say that. You know, I've enjoyed watching Celtic for a number of years now, whereas with Rangers, you know, it's a bit of a struggle at times. But the problem Philippe Clement's got is it's all good and well recovering and beating the two Dundee sides. However, it just takes one result to turn that fully again. So he's got to keep everybody on their toes, have everybody fresh, and, you know, start this European campaign well, because he wants to keep any potential criticism at bay. But I thought they were good against Dundee, I have to say, although I also have to say they had to rely on Jack Butland on a good few occasions. Dundee should have scored at least one or two goals in that match, although Rangers did deserve to win it.
We did a podcast earlier in the week looking at Rangers' kind of off-field battles and issues and so on. And as I wonder if, you know, a good positive European campaign as much as any kind of on-field success, can help kind of take the focus away from that, and clearly, obviously, the finances that come with European success as well would be good for Philippe Clement and Rangers.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that. Certainly, I think the Rangers, welcome any money they can get, especially ahead of the January transfer window. In terms of the league, I think Philippe Clement just wants to be in touch with Celtic and Aberdeen. I have to say, the way it's going at the moment, come the turn of the year, and he can go and reinvest in the squad. And that sounds crazy to say because the summer transfer window's just shut. However, there was a set of circumstances there with Todd Cantwell waiting in the wings and he going so late on in the window, and the Champions League qualifiers were going to dictate a lot, and then they ran out of time really. So they have made a good few signings, but I think a good run in the Europa League, which as a club they're capable of. Whether this group of players is capable of or not, we'll find out in due course. But I think it'll be a tough one tonight. I think it's tough to call, but they'll be desperate for a number of reasons, as you've touched on, Al, to start well.
You mentioned the revamped format, so rather than it being a group stage, it's obviously similar to the Champions League, a 36-team league with each club facing 8 different teams. Given Rangers' fixtures, it's tough to say that will work in Rangers' favour, isn't it? They have had a particularly tough draw.
Yeah, they have. I mean, to get Manchester United and Tottenham, that's a tough draw for anyone. I just don't see them, although they'll be glamourtised, I just don't see them getting anything out of the game. I don't think Rangers are at a place at the moment where they want glamourtised. I think they just want winnable games of football where they can go build confidence and try and progress in the tournament. They have got it in them, and they've produced more than a few shock results in Europe over the last 5 or 6 years. However, I think this is going to be a real tough ask for them to try and progress into the next round. And starting tonight, these are the types of games you would quite like to have at home. Get 3 points on the board, but Henrik Rydstrom and his side, I just believe that they'll have a lot of confidence given their history against Rangers. Although they lost every single game in their last Europa League appearance a couple of years ago. So, it's a tough ask. It's a tough draw. But if you look at the fixtures, then tonight is probably one they'll be looking to take points from.
Okay, before we go any further, let's hear a little bit of what the Rangers manager Philippe Clement had to say when he spoke to the media ahead of the match.
It's a new game of football, and of course we analysed Malmo really well. That's also interesting thing now, as a staff with this new formula in the Europa League or in the Champions League, the same. So before you had a group stage with 4 teams, so you have 3 opponents. So you analyze them 3 times, and then you have your game that you can analyze to show the players for the next game. Now it will be 8 times analyzing a totally different team. So it's a lot of more work to do, but it's also more challenges, and I think it's interesting for everybody. We are ambitious. We always want to do better than we did before. Every month we want to do better, and that's the exciting thing about the project now. We have a new squad. We have a lot of new young guys coming in, having the first taste for some in European football. It's challenging for them, and it's interesting for us to see how fast they adapt to that every 3-day performance, every 3 days to be on the top of your toes and to play big games. And this is now the start of that period to come. With the draw, we didn't get any presents. That's really clear if you compare with other groups. So we have a really, really tough group to qualify out of. But we're going to just focus on ourselves, game by game, going full to take the 3 points. And then see what this format brings.
In terms of how Philippe Clement approaches this game, Rory, would you imagine that he would be thinking that probably a point from this is a positive start?
Yeah, I think it's a positive start. I think if it were offered him a point right now, I don't think he'd take it. I think he'd still want to go out there and try and get the 3. You hear these comments about, take a point right now. I don't think it's one of those fixtures, Al, where I think when all is said and done, if they come away with a point, then I think it will be a half decent result. I don't think they would take it right now. I think they'll feel they're capable of going out there and winning the match. So he'll be looking for all three, and depending on how the game plays out, he may be happy with one, but I think he just wants something positive to bring back to Glasgow, because I don't think, given the group they've got, a defeat to kick off the campaign would stand them in good stead, and they'll still be a bit of a hangover from that awful Champions League campaign as well, so they'll not want that to happen again with some of the fixtures they've got coming up.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Champions League qualifiers, which might have gone differently. We'll never know if had Jefty not been rather harshly sent off. But as a result of that, of course, he's suspended for this one. Ridvan Yilmaz still injured. So we're going to see a Dujon Sterling left back appearance again. He's the kind of utility man in that Rangers side. I can't really think of any other obvious candidates. Can you?
No, it looks like it is. I feel a little bit sorry for Dujon Sterling, actually. I mean, against Dundee at the weekend, he didn't have the greatest of first halves, and he got taken off at half time. And I think people forget he's not a midfielder. He went in and did exceptionally well in a time where they struggled, and he's moved around here, there, and everywhere. So he is a fullback by trade, a right back. But I don't
think he's ever played it. He played everywhere else except right back for Rangers.
Aye, well, that's just it. So he'll go out to left back, and I've no concerns that he'll go and do a good job. So we'll wait and see, but that certainly looks the same. Malmo look like they play 4-2-3-1 as well as Rangers, so it may be man for man, and I don't think Sterling will have any issues against many wingers, to be honest. I think he's a right good fullback.
Yeah. What about the rest of the team? Do you expect to see many changes to the side that beat Dundee, or would you imagine Rangers will kind of stick with that winning formula? Tom Lawrence is beginning to come on a game. Cherny and Bayrami kind of getting a bit more into the flow of it as well.
Yeah, I think he'll probably go with that. Lawrence has impressed. I think his work rate is it went up this season. When I've seen him a couple of times last season, there's times where I think he can maybe do a little bit more off the ball. Whereas this season, I think he's putting the work rate in. We seen him on the weekend. He was in his own half quite often, running to get the ball and always looking for it. Thought he played well. Sterling will obviously go to left back, and there'll be one change there. But out with that, no, I don't see many changes needing to be made. Desser's getting a couple of goals as well. So look, they're in a half decent place going into it, Rangers, and I don't see many, if any, more changes than that one.
One man who knows both teams well is Joachim Bjorklund, the former Sweden international, spent 2 successful years at Ibrox in the late 90s and is currently assistant manager at IFK Gothenburg. Jonathan Sutherland's been catching up with him ahead of the match.
Joachim, pleasure to talk to you. A well-known figure at Rangers in the 90s and a World Cup third place finish as well. An illustrious career, 70 plus caps for Sweden. Great to have you on the Scottish Football Podcast. You're currently assistant manager at IFK Gothenburg. But let's start with Malmo. They are top of the Swedish top flight just now. How well are they playing? They are, of course, current Swedish champions.
No, they're obviously the best team in Sweden for the last couple of years. They got the biggest resources. They get the best players. They'll win the league again by a fair margin, I think.
What sort of team are they, would you say, Joachim? How can Rangers expect them to play?
They're a team that wants to keep the ball. They play out from the back always. They're not a very direct team until they get the ball in the final third. They spend a lot of energy and time on the build-up. So if Rangers want to hurt them, there's plenty of opportunities to press them high, try to win the ball high, and win the ball close to the goal and go straight for it. But they're a technical side, well drilled. They got a manager who's been there for a couple of years now, and he's known for his football philosophy. He's looked a lot towards Spain, I think. Keeping the ball is the best way to both attack and defend. So they're a good team with the ball.
Has that been the key to their success, a sort of possession-based game?
Yeah, possession-based with, here in Sweden, the best players as well. And that obviously helps a little bit. I must say the difference with the Swedish league and the Scottish, I'm not sure it's that big anymore, not even the biggest clubs. But I think top two teams in Scotland are still a little bit better than the top teams in Sweden. Should be.
Who would you say the key men to look out for Malmo are? Who do Rangers need to be most wary of?
They got a centre half, used to play in England for a lot of years in Brentford, both in the Premiership and the Championship. Pontus Jansson, he's good with the ball in the build-up and extremely dangerous on set pieces. So he's one guy to look out for. And then they got a couple of good strikers, Kiese Thelin and Swedish guy, and Botheim, a Norwegian guy who came from a Russian club here this season. He's a decent striker, but I think more than a key personality, it's the way they play. They're comfortable with having a ball. It's either you win it or you have to defend well and have some patience. I think that's key more than anything else.
I had a quick look through the names in the Malmo squad. I must admit, I'm not overly familiar with most of them, but one name that stood out was Sead Haksabanovic, who obviously spent time at Celtic. I don't think he's featured that much for Malmo. What's the situation there?
He came this summer. He had a rough time abroad, and they brought him in for quite a lot of money for being in Sweden. And when he came, he wasn't really match fit, and he's so far struggled to take a place. But he's a good player, and he'll get in shape, he'll get in form, and then they probably will play him sooner or later. He's a good player.
What sort of atmosphere, Joachim, can Rangers expect in Malmo?
A good atmosphere. It's actually one thing that we're pretty proud of in Sweden. The league might not be the best, but the atmosphere in most stadiums is actually really good. I think it's European class. I'm not comparing it to Ibrox or Parkhead, but for being a smaller club, it's always full and there's a lot of fans. It's actually a good atmosphere.
You're currently assistant manager of IFK Gothenburg. I can still feel the disappointment of when Gothenburg beat Dundee United in the 1987 UEFA Cup final, which is, I'm showing my age there, but obviously a big club in Sweden, currently in the bottom half of the Allsvenskan. But you touched on it earlier, Joachim, generally in terms of the standard of the Swedish league compared to the Scottish Premiership. Yeah, just in a bit more detail, how would you compare the two?
Let's put it this way. I think we were further ahead, both leagues, 20, 25 years ago, especially before the Bosman ruling. I know the two big clubs in Scotland, they have resources that we don't have here in Sweden, but I think the Swedish league has gone backwards the last 20 years. We're not competing as well as we used to do in Europe, and I think nowadays for a team to just qualify for the group stages is considered a success, while when I played in Gothenburg in the early 90s, we were supposed to go to the group stages of the Champions League, and we were supposed to do well as well. So it's changed quite a lot, and I think it's a bit the same for the Scottish League, with the exception that you have two clubs that every now and again surprises a little bit in Europe. But the rest of them, I mean, you talked about the 87 final in the UEFA Cup. I can't see that happening again. I remember here in Gothenburg as well when Aberdeen beat Real Madrid. I think it was 83 in pouring rain in the Cup Winners' Cup final. I can't see that happening again as well. So I think both leagues the last 30 years has been a bit hard on us, to be honest.
I'm glad to see you're showing your age as well, Joachim.
I'm older than you. Trust me. Just look at the hair or lack of hair.
just about. I must admit, in terms of, you talked about the Swedish league, is there still a good amount of young, talented Swedish players coming through, do you feel?
Yeah, more or less, but the problem is nowadays they leave too early. They go to other clubs in Europe where they might get better paid, but it's not necessarily the best option for the development, but it makes the Swedish club struggling a bit. Before, we could keep them for a bit longer. I remember my Gothenburg team, we had 7 or 8 international players in the same squad. I think nowadays, if you look at the squad for the Swedish national team, there's maybe 1 or 2 playing in Allsvenskan. So it's different times, and it makes it harder for Swedish club football to get results in Europe.
In terms of Rangers, Joachim, do you still follow events at Ibrox? And if so, what do you make of your old team at this moment?
I haven't watched any games this season. I know it's only just begun. Last season I watched quite a few. I normally keep keen eye on especially Rangers more than anything else in Scotland. Last season I watched a lot. Then I was in Norway, where a couple of players in my team who played for the other side in Glasgow, Stefan Johansson and Jo Inge Berget. So we had our discussions, and we watched a couple of derbies together as well. And unfortunately, you know what happened last season. So it was a good time to leave Norway.
Please excuse my ignorance of Norwegian football. Which club was that at, Joachim? And I'm fascinated by you watching the Old Firm derby with 2 former Celtic players.
It was Sarpsborg 08. That's the top flight of Norwegian league as well. And we felt we needed a couple of older, more experienced guys, so we brought in a couple of ex-Celtic players.
And how did that go?
They were good players, I must admit. It hurts to say, but they were good players and good lads.
Yeah, I remember them well at Celtic. They were top players, of course. In terms of Rangers, Joachim, what is the perception, would you say, of Rangers in Sweden at the moment? Is this seen as a good chance for Malmo to get 3 points on the board?
I would say so, especially the home game. I know they've played Rangers a couple of times before in pretty recent history. They beat them in the qualifiers for the Champions League a few years back. And then I seem to remember like 10, 12 years ago, they played them as well with good results. So I think, especially the home game, I wouldn't say they expect to get 3 points, but they know they're going to be in with a chance. But otherwise, Rangers here in Sweden, they're known as a big club, successful club, obviously, but maybe not as good as they used to be. Who
do you think will win, and who do you want to see win in this match? I guess it's a slight conflict.
It's no conflict. Malmo is and has always been my biggest rival here in Sweden, all through my playing times to my coaching career.
Okay.
So that's an easy choice, and I had 2 very good years at Ibrox. So my feelings and my hopes are on Rangers. The result, I think it's 50-50, more or less. I think Rangers would have been a favourite if the game would have been at Ibrox, but now I think it's a tough task.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sports Scotland.
Joachim Bjorklund there. He reckons Rangers can get joy by pressing Malmo high up the pitch. Do you think that's an approach they can take, Rory? Is that something they'd be suited to?
It's come into the game, the modern game, a lot, talking about pressing high up the pitch, etc. But it has to be right. It has to be worked on. If one person goes and the others don't follow, or they're slightly out of position, you're left wide open. So Rangers can get joy from it, but they need to be well aligned in their press. Communication needs to be good, because when it doesn't work, it can be a disaster. And yes, Malmo might struggle to play out from the back at times, but if they do get through them, they get players that can hurt them up front. It's risk reward. It's one of those, but I don't see Rangers going out there and pressing them really high up the pitch from minute one.
Well, Joachim Bjorklund thinks it's a 50-50 match. Briefly, how do you see it going?
Yeah, it's a tough one to call. Don't know if Rangers will go out there and get the win. I think probably a score draw is the most likely outcome, one each.
Okay, thanks to Rory Loy and Joachim Bjorklund. That's all we've got time for. Thank you for listening to this one. Remember, you can listen to Malmo Rangers on BBC Radio Scotland Extra from 5 o'clock. You can also keep up to date with all the live action on the BBC Sport website and app. And of course, we'll have reaction and analysis to whatever transpires in Sweden this evening here on the Scottish Football Podcast. So to be alerted when new episodes are out, subscribe on BBC Sounds and have push notifications turned on your phone. Bye for now.
This is the shocking moment English football has been dreading.
My name is Moses Swabu, and I used to be a professional footballer. But then I got in deep with organised crime and became a match fixer operating in the English League.
A match-fixing investigator has highlighted 2 matches he says appear to have suspicious betting patterns.
How honest are you going to be with me? This is 100%. Join me for Sports Strangest Crimes presents Confessions of a Match Fixer. Listen on BBC Sounds.